Hello, guten Tag, bonjour, здравствуйте, Shabbat Shalom, and etc. Welcome to the future. Welcome to one of the most important events of the year 2021, nay, the 21st century. It's the second season of Campcast, first episode. Hello, once again. So before I introduce our guest for today, our débutant, I just have a few items of administrative housekeeping. Don't forget that, as always, you can pop over to the Campfire Speaking Club page if you are interested in joining the Speaking Club and you are a listener of Campcast. Don't forget that you can use the promo code Campcast21. That's CAMPCAST21, Campcast21. And when you join the club and buy your first packet, you will receive a free lesson. So that's that. Also, I just wanted to give a brief update on Technical Tuesday. People who are subscribed to the Campfire page will already have seen that under the hashtag Technical Tuesday, I've started to make it a little bit more robust, a bit more of a meaty feature of the page. So going forward, Technical Tuesday is not only going to be a bit longer and on some more, let's say, philosophical as well as linguistic topics, there's also going to be an audio track that goes along with the text. So you can read, you can listen, you can read and listen at the same time. For any teachers listening who are looking for resources, be my guest. Feel free to take that exercise and use it as a reading exercise, use it as a listening exercise, as a gap fill. I'm absolutely more than happy. If you could show that it comes from Campfire, I would be grateful to show the source. Yeah, it's not copyrighted, so do what you want. Plagiarize it if you want. So that's that. My guest for today is Julia from the page Discover English Teaching. Julia has a really great community. She's helped a lot of teachers in their self-confidence, in their professional development, in their personal development. So if you are a teacher or someone who is simply interested in learning English, then you need to get over to her page right now and go and check it out. Not only that, me and Julia did a live stream yesterday about common mistakes that native English speakers make when speaking or indeed writing. So that was a really fun time. And thank you once again to Julia for inviting me on her channel. That was really nice. And we had a great time. People seem to react very well to the stream. So yeah, I think we'll probably do a few more of those in the future. So if you want to be updated about any future live streams that me and Julia are doing or any other content, then go and subscribe to her page. In today's podcast, we talked about all manner of topics, including pronunciation, including educational philosophy, how languages are taught as opposed to sciences, and all manner of interesting stuff. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the show.
So what are we going to talk about?
All sorts of nonsense. Who knows? Who knows? Okay, I think we've already started, so let's just keep going. So,
I have
Julia,
a question for you. I know nothing about you, honestly, just a little. So I would like to get to know you. And the first question is going to be a little bit weird, but I'm pretty sure people asked you, like, why do you have a weird name on VK? Because you introduced yourself as Mike to me, but then it is spelled like MAYK on VK.
Yeah. So that's because, and by the way, saying that you know nothing about me, that describes most people. I'm by no means anywhere near as well known as you or any of the other guests that I interviewed, but no, seriously, props to you, because you've got a page which is focused on teacher development and teaching English and pronunciation, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. And you've got like 20,000 followers more.
26, yeah, I think
26.
so.
That's a lot. That's a lot for such a narrow
True.
specificity. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Hopefully I can get somewhere near you with my pathetic 800 and something followers. But hey, my
What?
oh
I was there once. I mean, we all started with 800. Like,
yeah. Well, I personally started with 0, but yeah, sure. I'm gonna show you something. Check out this. Mine. I don't have as many followers, but they are terroristically fanatic almost. Check this out. This is from one of my subscribers.
Ah,
Made
you
me a
serious?
t-shirt.
That's wait, is that a hole there? Like, what is
No,
there
no, no. It's a little badge. Little badge.
Ah, okay, that's awesome. Wow, okay, so you see that well, none of my subscribers have ever done anything to me
What
like this.
you should block them all. Yeah, you don't have a. But this is not just any subscriber. This is from Olga, who has been on the podcast actually. She's like a literary maniac. So she has a page. It's called Interests, and she does all sorts of. Basically, it's like Clill, but like super duper Clill. So she is all about learning English through books and films, and she herself is a huge book bug, as she calls it. And she also got me this Brodsky book. So she sent this to me as a Christmas present. So yeah, just really because I'm a big fan of Brodsky, as is my wife.
You speak Russian.
Yes, yeah.
That's
Oh, did you
impressive.
not know? Yes.
No.
Well, you said you know nothing about me, so yeah, fair enough. Yeah. So okay, let me. So you've hijacked my show. Normally, I ask you to tell you about yourself, but okay.
No, but I want to find out more about you.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So my name's Mike, which, as you know, in Russian is spelt with this и краткое letter, which of Kontakte translates into English as this Y,
And
which
my
is
VK is in English, so I never knew. That's why. Okay,
well.
so
There
see,
we go. So my VK is in Russian, and I just put my name in Russian, and VK translated it, and you can't choose how it translates it. So yeah, I didn't actually realize for the longest time until I started corresponding with people like you who have your VK in English, presumably because it's just simpler because you write in English a lot of the time.
yeah, and
And
your
then
last name is perfect, right? Isn't it like Brennan? Like it's
yeah,
no.
the last name is not very difficult. I didn't put my middle name in there. My middle name is James. But there we go. There's something you didn't know about me. Just like every other fact that you didn't know about me. So I'm until recently, I was based in Tyumen in Western Siberia, where I worked as an English teacher and a Cambridge examiner for a number of years. I'm
What
originally
brought you
from.
there?
Hmm?
What brought you there? Like, why Siberia? That's harsh.
Yeah, so this is something that I spoke to Ekaterina about on, I think it was Campcast 10, about why Siberia. Yeah, fair enough. It was mainly because, you know, I studied in Russia before I worked there. So I studied in the state university in Yaroslavl, and also in St. Petersburg in a private language school. So I spent some time in the western part of Russia, in the quote unquote European part of Russia, and I just wanted to find out a little bit more about the country. And I saw this really great job at a language school in Tyumen, and I worked there, and also worked in Nizhny for a few months.
Ooh. Oh my gosh! So
Pretty cold.
you're no stranger to snow.
I am no stranger to snow. That is true. That is true. Neither is my wife. Actually, that's not quite true. So my wife, her name is Dasha. She's originally from Astrakhan, but
That's a very warm place, right?
exactly, lots of watermelons, lots of sturgeons, lots of illicit caviar.
Two extremes, I think. No, like in Russia, like Astrakhan
Yeah,
is like one of the warmest places. Yeah, and Tyumen is like one of the coldest places.
exactly. So I mean, her dad is an oil and gas guy, which is why he moved to Siberia for work, and so we met there, and we got married, and we moved back to the UK in 2019. So I've been back in the UK for nearly 2 years now. Nearly 2 years.
What's your
Um, So yeah, I don't know what else to. At university, I studied Russian and Spanish language, and then obviously I went on to get an additional qualification to allow me to teach English. And here I am. And now I decided to set up this my speaking club. This is the Campfire Speaking Club, and this podcast to go along with it. And yeah, that's about it.
Do you miss Russia?
Yeah, yeah. Some parts of it I do miss, but you know, I how do I phrase this without using a double negative? Hail, I'll use a double negative. It's Sunday. I didn't leave Russia for no reason. There was a reason that I decided to move back to the UK.
Care to
Um,
share?
well, I
Or is
mean,
it
it's there are a lot of different things. So a lot of the time, for example, I wasn't the only foreigner living in Tumen. Obviously, there was my colleagues in the school and the local newspapers and these little online newspapers. You know, this like like local crappy Tumen paper would interview my colleagues and say, "This English guy moved to Tumen and became happier." Like those kinds of patronizing headlines, which grandmas love to read about. I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to lie. I'm not going to try and patronize people or make stir up any patriotic feelings in people. There is a difference in level of life in Siberia and in the UK. That's just a fact. And there are certain things which I missed about being in the UK. And don't get me wrong, there are certain things I miss about Russia. I miss my friends. I miss because I've got family there now. Obviously my wife's family's there. And just lots of different things. Lots of different things. Um, and I can't wait to go back and visit, which I hope to do soon. But with this Corona nonsense going on, it's pretty difficult. I'm
Was
sure
it just a coincidence that you got back to the UK right before the pandemic, or like
it
how?
wasn't. No, it wasn't right before. I came back at the very beginning of 2019.
Okay, so it
Uh,
was just
yeah.
luck, basically.
So I do two different jobs. So I run this. I run the Campfire Conversation Club, obviously, and I do this podcast, which is kind of the same. It's all one sort of side business, but that's just my side business. My main job is I work for an educational consultancy company. It's called Optimus Education. So basically, we do anything that schools need that they can't get from the government, we do. So we do training and resources, teacher development. We do accreditations for schools. So like, is your school really good at working with, I don't know, kids with disabilities? Or is your school really good at communicating with parents? We have like our own inspections and awards and stuff that we help schools with. And all of that.
Do
All that
schools
sort of stuff.
hire you, or how does it go?
Say again?
You cannot hear me?
No,
Can you
no, I
hear me?
can. Sorry, it just Zoom sometimes cuts
I
out.
know,
If
I know it's annoying. So I said, wait, what did I say? Oh, do the schools hire you? Like, is it
yeah,
their
yeah.
choice to hire you? Yeah.
Yeah, so we're a private company, and so we're essentially we're in the school improvement business.
Okay,
It
got
could
it.
be state schools, it could be private schools. We work with international schools as well. We run conferences. We run a conference in Dubai, for example, conferences in London, Manchester, all over the place. So yeah, yeah.
Cool. And what does your wife do?
She's a homemaker, so basically
That's
she
perfect.
stays at home.
You
Yeah,
guys have a perfect family.
it's a rarity. It's very very difficult.
It's a perfect family.
It's very difficult to have a single income family in the UK. Not like in Russia. In Russia, you can do it. Here, you need pretty much the husband and the wife both to work. Otherwise, it's very difficult to survive. But we're managing it. We're managing it. This is a very expensive part of the country that I'm living in as well. So we don't always have a lot of spare cash. But hey, at least we got a family, right? Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Don't
So
complain.
I don't want to spend, or I know that you asked me to, but I don't want to spend too much time speaking about just me. Tell me a little bit about you. So tell me about your page, about your content, what about your background and stuff. What are you all about?
Oh, okay. What should I start with? Well, as you definitely know, I'm an English teacher. I mean, that would be obvious, right? My background, I don't think my background is that interesting, honestly. Like, I come from St. Petersburg, from a regular average family. I got my degree at a Russian state pedagogical university, which honestly didn't teach me much. Maybe improved my English a little bit, but when I graduated, I knew nothing or like next to nothing about teaching, pedagogics or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, and I worked for 2.5 years for different companies, and then I decided to move to China for multiple reasons. Um, and I think somewhere roughly at the end of my time in China, I decided to, it was like people ask me, why did I decide to create this community? Honestly, I think it was more like, it's gonna sound very cheesy, but like epiphany, like somewhere in the middle of the night, I was like, I have to do that. I have no
Hmm.
clue why, what I am going to achieve, by doing this and where it's gonna bring me, but I just have to. So yeah, I just acted on my emotions and feelings, and then I moved to Vietnam. I spent a year and a half there, teaching English, obviously, all this time. And then afterwards, I left. That was like 20. I'm really confused with years. Like now it's 2021, right?
It is, yes.
Like 20, okay, so that was also 2019. Yeah.
Okay.
I decided to leave Vietnam. I traveled a bit, and then I got back to Russia and I got stuck there, as most people, because we don't want to name what, why, the reason. And yeah, and my community is about 3.5 years ago. Yeah, I mean, 3.5 years ago, I created it, and um, the content. I don't think it's that special because there's lots of different communities on VK or on other social networks devoted to English teaching. I guess my thing is, first of all, that I don't use any Russian because that's what I strongly believe in. Yeah, teaching languages without using any translation or like without using your native language. And that's why, like, I advocate for that, and I need to show people that it's possible. Yeah, so by my own example. And I just I think my whole community is kind of like it consists of all the parts that constitute me in the first place. So it's like teaching, it's English, it's traveling a little bit.
Mm.
It's like all the things that I enjoy. They're represented in my community. And most of all, it's just my main idea, I guess, was to create a community where people feel safe and not judged, because I know that especially in our sphere, in ELT or ESL sphere, there's lots of competition, and like people are always trying um, to find faults, with each other, and like
Mm.
try to criticize each other, or try to show off or whatever. And I despise this kind of um, I don't know, side of our sphere, because
Mm.
I don't know
Yeah,
why we have to do that. Like I really like the idea of abundance. Like there's always enough for everybody. So it's
I
no,
agree. I agree. A lot of people, I think, have like a famine mentality when it comes to. So we've got Julia's page, and we've got my page, and then there's Volvo's page, and there's lots of people's pages that we can all think of. But you know, what do you think is going to happen if someone finds out about someone else's page, that they're going to steal your clients from you? Like, it doesn't work like that. You just spread the good word. I have people on this podcast all the time, whether it's you or Vova Pavlovic, Irina Lutsenko, all of those, like, and spread the good word about their pages, because I think that people who are subscribing to a certain page, they want, as you say, the most abundant material that they can find, and everyone has their own approach. It doesn't mean that there's one correct approach or any incorrect approaches, but yeah, I have much more of a feast mentality than a famine mentality. I think there's enough for everyone. There's enough consumers for everyone. There's enough pages for everyone. And yeah, let the subscribers decide what they like the best. People vote with their feet, or vote with their mouse clicking finger in this case. Yeah.
true. But honestly, not everybody believes this, unfortunately. I've had people like straightforwardly asking me, why do you do this? Like, do you realize that if you help others improve, that means that they will get your students, or they will compete with you. Even my own mom asked me this. Like, she was like, why would you do this? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, no, there's always enough. Like, look, there's 7 billion people. What do you think? I will not find my own audience just because I share some good stuff with people? Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I
Mhm.
agree. There are certain members of now. I don't want to name any names because the person that I'm thinking of has a lot of subscribers who are very loyal to him or her.
Oh, maybe
Her.
yeah.
Um, and um, and if I say anything critical of him or her, her, then I might get a lot of hate coming my direction. But there's a certain um a certain curly haired person who is very infamous for that kind of stuff that you describe of like, say, I'm just gonna defend myself and I don't care about your page and it's a dog eat dog world. Like I've got no time for people like that. The whole idea of my community, so the reason I called it Campfire is because I deeply, deeply believe that gathering around a campfire and connecting as humans and sharing stories, that there's a reason that when you have a really nice evening of sitting around a campfire, there's a reason you don't forget that. It's an ancient, ancient memory left over from our ancestors. And we are social animals. We are social creatures. We need to, in order to understand the world around us, we need to do it through stories, through jokes, through laughing, through embracing, through and I know this sounds kind of corny, but it's so true. There are people in this world, especially now during this lockdown nonsense, who are isolated from human contact. They get a Yandex taxi and they press the button saying, I would rather not speak to the
Oh,
driver.
there's a button like this. I never noticed. Are you
Yeah,
serious?
yeah. It's really sad. It's really sad. And they get in a taxi and they get in their lift and they go to their computer and they watch YouTube and they don't call their friends because you can always text. And some people go years without really having a meaningful conversation with someone. And I'm so glad that I've got this speaking club, especially during lockdown, because I spend every evening having deep, deep philosophical conversations with people, and sometimes just talking about nonsense, both of which are very necessary for basic sanity, in my opinion.
Like the types of people that you just described, honestly, I have to confess I was like this myself. And I kind of feel like sometimes I also sway towards this kind of behavior because um, I do believe that we come into this world alone, this all this philosophical stuff and like we'll leave alone. So that's why you always have to rely on yourself and stuff like that. But I've noticed that sometimes, especially when I live abroad, like for instance, it happened to me in Vietnam when I was like really deeply engaged in my work and in the community, and because I had to work, I had like my full-time job in Vietnam, plus also online classes, plus community, lots of stuff. So I felt like I had enough communication, interaction with people because my work is about that,
Hmm.
right? So I started avoiding my colleagues, not really on purpose. I think it was unintentional. It was just because I got tired, of communicating with people, and I felt like I wanted some time on my own, with myself. And then I started getting depressed. And I didn't like at that moment, I thought to myself that, well, it must be because I work so much, so I don't have enough me time. So I started creating it, but actually it was an illusion. As soon as I realized that I lacked real communication with people around me, even like people that maybe I'm not that similar to, but still we can learn so much from each other. And I started going out and I started hanging out with my colleagues, and doing stuff with people. It vanished, like all my depression vanished. And I
Hmm.
realized I was kind of deceiving myself. I was like, yeah, I'm independent. I can do whatever I want on my own. I don't need any people around me. But then I was like, yeah, yeah, but I am same as everybody else, a social being. Yeah. So it's stupid to deceive ourselves. And you do feel re-energized every time you have a lovely evening with people and you talk about something philosophical.
100%. Which I'm incredibly lucky because for me that's pretty much every evening. Um, I have Friday evening I take off. Saturday is Shabbat for me. Sunday I record this podcast. and every other day, I'm having deep, meaningful conversations with people, and it's what makes us human. I firmly believe that.
And helps us develop as well, because you get to listen to different ideas and different,
yeah. That for sure. And I don't stray away from controversial topics, all of this sort of parsnips nonsense. I don't buy that at all. We'll talk about religion, politics, sex, drugs, alcohol, rock and roll, bring it on. I don't give a shit. We talk about everything, because what are you going to come into the class and say, okay, guys, we're not going to talk about drugs today because drugs are bad. Like, who are you to say that maybe these people want to learn how to say, certain types of substances in English? It's none of your business as a teacher. You better teach it. And from that, you get really interesting vocabulary that comes along with it. For example, someone they have never even considered, like, nюхать. How can I say that in English? Like, okay, that could be about drugs, but it's also quite an interesting verb in itself. Sniff. Yeah. Or snort. And then from that, you also get snort is not only, like take something in your nose, but it's also this sort of, to make like a pig sound when you're laughing. If you laugh too much and you go like that, then that's also snort in English. And from that, then the journey of learning vocabulary continues. As soon as you, lock away certain topics and say, guys, we can't talk about that. That's too controversial. No, bullshit. Talk about everything. Talk about everything. Otherwise, you can't call yourself a true language learner, in my opinion.
I'm totally on the same page with you. Honestly, I think that most of the topics that are sort of considered to be veto, they're actually the most exciting ones, because, and I guess maybe that's why they were vetoed in the first place, yeah, because it gets people really engaged. Because like religion, for example, every time I talk about religion with my friends, and obviously, friends and classes, that's different, yeah, and usually with friends, you feel like more laid back and you can talk about anything. It's one of the most exciting topics, even though like none of us are religious, but we kind of, I don't know, it sparks something, and you really want to express your opinion, and you want to maybe, get to the bottom of things, like why was religion formed in the first place and stuff like that. So I totally agree. And also, I just wanted to say that, for example, sex was a vetoed topic in, you probably know, in the USSR, and it didn't really bring us to any good result, So I think that
I'm remembering the Chili Most episode with the woman
which one?
Who said, "Use sex and yet," that famous line.
Yeah. So I mean, it didn't really bring any like it was. I think it was kind of like it backfired. Yeah, I could probably say. And I think that if we feel free about any topic, and if we feel like, well, we should maybe foster this habit of feeling comfortable around each other, even strangers, kind of, yeah, not just friends, talking about anything. This will help us solve lots of problems, because lots of problems actually appear because we don't talk about that, because we, dwell on certain things inside, yeah, somewhere, and we don't share anything. We don't reveal what we feel about certain things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, I very often find that just naturally the same topics come up on my podcast. So, for example, we're speaking to Susanna about this same question about freedom of speech. You can't lock away certain topics and pretend that they don't exist, because, okay, you can stop someone from saying something. They think the same thing, right? That thought's still there, and that it's like black comedy. Take black comedy. If you make it like a joke about something terrible, if you make a joke about some starving African children, or you make a joke about the Holocaust, of course, we all understand that those are terrible things and they're not funny, but you can still joke about them. And when you hear a really, really funny joke that's just right on the money, even if it's about some horrible topic like murdering children or 9/11 or the Holocaust, you can't help yourself. If it's funny, you'll laugh. It's an involuntary like an involuntary reaction, and if you know you shouldn't be laughing, it makes it even worse. But dark humor is absolutely necessary, as I would say is talking about controversial and difficult topics. Having said that, I'm now going to contradict myself. Having said that, wouldn't you say that, so me and you, as people who receive money for teaching English, this is a value added service, we're providing a service, don't you think that we have an obligation to somewhat censure the lesson and to somewhat make it appropriate, and so it won't hurt anyone's feelings? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, yes, it's important that you don't hurt anybody's feelings, because otherwise you might lose your students, or God forbid, you will somehow damage their self-esteem, especially when it comes to English. Yeah, if you somehow insult them or hurt their feelings, and they will associate this emotion with English, and that's definitely not what you want to aim at. But once again, I think teacher is, maybe in this question, I'm gonna compare a teacher to a parent. So I think we can all agree that we would want our parents to be more open or more open-minded, like when they were bringing us up. I mean, for them to be able to talk about anything with us, for me, for example, to be able to discuss anything with my mom, for example, for her sometimes to feel okay with me swearing, for instance, and stuff like that. So this is just coming from so this is coming from my childhood, and this is what kind of teacher I want to be. Yeah. So for example, if I feel like teaching people some slang words about sex or drugs, types of drugs, or I remember teaching my teenagers the word weed, and I was like totally fine with that, because
my God, Julia, you rebel.
Come on, that's a joke. I know that, because I'm pretty sure you taught something more serious. Right? Am I right?
Oh yeah, we had a whole lesson about drugs. Did I can't remember if I put a video about it on my my page. No, I don't think I did. I've got a PowerPoint presentation about drugs vocabulary somewhere. I'll try and dig it up, and we can spread the good word about drugs.
Yeah. Well, so all these topics, I mean, we can pretend to ignore them, but they are big parts of our lives. Even if you don't do drugs, still drugs exist like somewhere around you. So chances are you will have to talk about that. And if you don't have the means to do that, you'll be stuck, and that will add up to your insecurities, in terms of English. So I remember I had a very funny situation in my class. We were talking about appearance, like some sort of, just the way people were modifying their bodies. And there was, I was teaching them like what is boob job is and nose job is, and I was trying to explain everything. And then this guy goes, "Oh, okay, got it. So what is blow job?" Because he heard it somewhere, but nobody explained it to him, and he didn't, I guess, have the guts to check it. Well, I told him, because I was like, it's better, like, it's kind of the same as with parents, it's better that your kids try alcohol with me, like that, than somewhere else, somewhere in the backyard with their friends. So same thing here. It's better he finds out from me rather than him being in an awkward situation because he doesn't know what that is, and he would use it along with nose job and boob job.
A good example of exactly that, and exactly that word is, so when I lived in Tumen, a lot of the time we would go between corporate clients. So I would teach, adults and kids and stuff at our main school, but then I would also go to, play like Schlumberger, Gazprom-Neft, and all of these like, oil and gas companies mainly, teaching them English in their offices. And so there was a colleague of mine who, so I mean, as soon as I got to Russia, I'd already studied Russian at university. So, I obviously, spoke.
How good is your Russian?
I'm fairly happy with it. I speak Russian as the language I speak at home. So I speak it every day. I sometimes I write some content in Russian. I've every now and again I'll speak a little bit of Russian on a podcast, but mainly the podcasts are English, obviously, because it's, you know, helping people practice their listening. Some of my subscribers have asked if I can do an episode entirely in Russian, which I will try and do this season. I will do a couple of episodes just purely in Russian. But you know, what one doesn't like to blow one's own trumpet. But suffice it to say, you know, the time I was living in Tumen, you know, I didn't have any problems communicating. Let's say it like that. However, you know, some of my colleagues who were English guys working there, they, you know, hadn't spent any time studying Russian, and so they obviously, you know, didn't speak it super well. And on your point about the blowjob, so my colleague, he's waiting for his taxi. He's waiting half an hour, and his taxi still hasn't arrived. He needs to get to his lesson. So he calls up, and in his best attempt at Russian, he tries to say, "Where are you? I've been here for 30 minutes." But he couldn't quite get the word for minuta correct. So he said, "Yes, stою 30 minut." And the woman on the other end of the phone was like, "What? You might have the wrong number, young man." So yeah, it was quite a funny misunderstanding, shall we say, on the phone.
Well, and that could be a dangerous situation. That could lead to some dangerous consequences.
It could. In a similar situation, but in English. So when I was teaching in Schlumberger, during this period of the company's history, the price of oil had gone through the floor. This was like 2014 when you know, when all that stuff happened.
I remember.
And what I remember even more so, because my salary was half of it was in pounds, but pegged to the ruble, so my salary just went down by half, which was not good. But yeah, so Schlumberger had been making a lot of people redundant, unfortunately. For anyone listening who doesn't know the word redundant, that means when a company sacks you, fires you, but not because you're a bad worker, simply for economic or for financial reasons, okay?
Laid off, right? You can say laid off as well.
Exactly. So this is what I was going to say. This woman was telling me about how a lot of people are getting sacked, but she got sacked and laid off confused. So she said, many people sucked off. And I'm like, no. Well, maybe, but that's not relevant to this particular conversation. So there we go. Well, enough of these salacious misunderstandings. Let's dive a little deeper into what I consider one of the real strong points, one of your fortes when it comes to your content. And I want to see if you agree with me. I would say that you are a real specialist when it comes to pronunciation.
Okay, somebody just mentioned the trumpet, so I'm not going to do that. I'm all right. I would say I'm all right.
When I say specialist, I'm not necessarily saying that your pronunciation is amazing. By the way, it is. But what I'm saying is that your content and the way that you prepare your materials when you teach pronunciation is very, very impressive. So I just watched one of your recent live streams about, oh, that's better to say, I watched the recording of your live stream about British versus American pronunciation, and just the amount of examples you've got off the top of your head is unbelievable. And do you write these down beforehand and you think, okay,
just because, yeah, I always lose the train of my thoughts, all the time. So that was a mistake. Lesson learned. I always have a plan before that.
So have you spent a lot of time in America? Because to me, you come across as having a more American accent than a British one.
No, I spent like 3 months. I think it was in 2012. And then that didn't really influence my accent. It was more like me having friends from America and talking to them and just like working my ass off, honestly, in order to achieve it. But I do have to say that I used to sound much more American. And I do sound more American when I'm like nervous or when I talk to strangers.
Like me. Well,
Yeah,
so there's a classic example. You said I worked my ass off, whereas I would say work my ass off as a ass. A little more British.
Very typical. Yeah, but I am trying my best to sort of find my own niche, somewhere where I feel like myself, because I have spent lots of years trying to achieve that moment when people tell me, okay, we don't see the difference between Americans and you. And then when I got to that, I was like, yo, but that's not me.
Mm,
That's trying to imitate somebody, some other personality or some other accent. But I want to have my own because I'm not American, I'm not British, I'm not Australian, I'm Russian. And I'm not saying that I want to sound like Russian, God forbid. I do not like Russian accent, but I do want to be, I don't know, to have my own identity, if it makes any sense.
mm. That
Um,
does make sense. That does make sense. And I think I think you have, if not fully, at least partially achieved that, because um, to the untrained ear, sure, people might mistake you for an American. Um, for someone, certainly for me, someone who knows a thing or two about accents, like I could hear straight away that you're not American, because although you do come across predominantly as American, sometimes you'll switch to a certain, like maybe a more British pronunciation, sometimes even Australian. I can hear a little bit in there.
my O is Australian. They tell
Yeah,
me.
exactly. So the way you say "so" is very
I
Australian.
know how to get rid of it. Like I try to work with my Canadian American friends and I'll try to imitate them. It doesn't work. It's just
No, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, so I don't have much of a regional accent in the way that I speak English. Um,
really.
but you can, if someone who really knows what they're talking about with regional accents could probably tell you that I'm from the Southwest. So the way that I pronounce OU on the, so things like about, words like that,
Uh-huh.
roundabout, you can just hear a little, it's almost like an oi sound as opposed to an ow sound. But again, that's not something that I could correct in my speech. Is very, well, I say correct quite wrongly. I mean, I don't think I need to correct it, but it's
Mhm,
not something I could change. Is all I mean.
mhm.
Hmm.
It kind of sounds to me a little bit like Canadian owl, no? A little bit. Like, don't you guys have similar ones?
Well, no, I would slightly push back on that. I would say that they are the Canadians would say something like "ooh" more. So, for example, they would say "about" instead of
Ah,
"about." I'm really exaggerating it now. "About" is how I would say "about."
so it's kind of
So
like you're vice versa, actually. Yeah, it's on the contrary, you kind of reduce the oo sound a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, I
You're,
guess, I
yeah,
guess, I
exaggerating the
guess.
ah sound.
There's.
Uh,
Do you ever watch Rick and Morty?
No, I don't like that.
Oh, you. Oh my God. Jesus, Julia, what you got to watch Rick and there's there's this hilarious bit in Rick and Morty, and I wonder how they translated this in the Russian version. But there's this bit where Rick is walking away from a panel of judges who are judging him for some crime, and he says, as they say in Canada, "peace out," and it just like died. It was so funny. The peace out. Yeah, I loved it. I really loved it. Rick and Morty's great. You should definitely watch it, or
So,
don't. I mean,
say piss out with your accent.
peace out.
Yeah, yeah, you do
Can you
some
hear
weird.
it a little bit of a West Country?
Yeah, like out is very prominent there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
could hear.
Um, so by the way, the term or the phrase British accent, um, that's not something we say. We don't say British accent. It sounds like a very American kind of phrase, because the Americans would say, someone who speaks like me, the Americans would call a British accent. But of course, for us, people from the UK, that makes no sense, because what they mean is an English accent, because I'm from England. And then
Yeah, but
people from Wales and Scotland, they speak differently.
yeah.
But so we would never say British accent, but the Americans would. But then I've just contradicted myself, because even the term English accent, that's meaningless, because people in Newcastle and in Liverpool and Manchester and Bristol all speak differently. Um, how much attention do you pay to regional accents when it comes to your content? Do you spend a lot of time thinking and teaching about that stuff?
Unfortunately not, because I was actually planning, well, before the pandemic happened, I had been planning to go to the UK because I've never been. and to explore at least countries. So, because I would really like to understand more differences between Scottish, for example, and Irish and Welsh and so on, and different kind of regional British accents. But no, honestly, what I would like to say is that even though you have watched a stream of mine, and that was more like because it was a demand from my
Mm,
audience, but I'm not really into accents that much. I am more into pronunciation because I think, accents, they don't matter that much. Yeah, it's kind of nice if you like, if you're really into that, it's really cool if you can identify a person by the certain sounds that they pronounce, but it's not really about communication. It's more about the clarity of your pronunciation, or the way how naturally you sound, so that people actually enjoy listening to you rather than wanting to close their ears. So that's why, like, I probably wouldn't want to teach that. I would want to study that, because I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to pronunciation, so that would be interesting for me. But I think I would not want to focus that much on regional accents or even country accents, like I'm in different, like American,
mm,
Australian,
mm.
so on.
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
yeah, no, I agree. I agree that it depends what you mean by accent, because pronunciations and accents, that's the same topic. But it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. There are different accents and different ways of speaking English, all of which are equally valid, and there's no one correct way of speaking English. Okay, we agree. But then if you agree that there's no one correct way of speaking English in terms of your accent, that's not the same as saying that every way of speaking English is correct. There are certain, I, for example, let's say I've got some, let's say I've got some coffee. Yeah, this is actually water, but let's say I've got some coffee in my bottle or in my cup. I could pronounce that coffee. I could pronounce that coffee if I'm from, like New York or the Bronx or whatever. I could pronounce it, however I want. But if I just decide one day I'm going to pronounce this word tea, that's not, I can't just say that's my accent. I just pronounce it like tea. That's, get off my back. Stop being a native speakerist, that there is a certain point at which a pronunciation variety doesn't become accent, it becomes a mistake. So finding where that boundary is super duper interesting. But yeah, I'm right behind you. I'm right behind you when you say that there's doesn't really matter what accent you have. Yeah, I agree.
I have a question for you then, because I'm pretty sure that you've noticed that in Russia, people are obsessed with, again, British accent, some type of it. But I guess that in Russia, they're usually focused on received pronunciation, which I'm not completely sure why they choose this particular accent, because it's not that common in Britain. Am I right? So
yeah. So this is kind of a politicized issue. It depends what you mean by received.
Veto topic. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. So it depends what you mean by received pronunciation. There's this kind of like, aristocratic, way that people would speak, sort of kind of like 1940s BBC radio. So, hello, welcome to the BBC Empire Service. That kind of pronunciation. Yeah, that's it's almost kind of artificial. And it's kind of like a made-up way of speaking, rather like there's a very interesting accent. It's called transatlantic. I think I've got that right. Transatlantic accent. So if you listen to sort of like old like American movies, the way that Americans speak in those movies, that is kind of like somewhere between American and English accents, that's called transatlantic. And people simply told them that you need to speak like that to appeal to an international audience. And so if you watch like a Yellow Brick or The Wizard of Oz, right, the Yellow Brick Road with Judy Garland, and was it her? I can't remember. Saying, hello, I just love visiting the Emerald City, and this is how I speak, and oh my God, like that kind of transatlantic accent. No one speaks like that apart from in those movies. However, if you mean someone who speaks quote unquote without a regional accent, that's me. That's how I speak. Is that received pronunciation? I don't know, probably not. But I'd say that the way that I speak, apart from these very small moments, like when I say about and out, I'm not really someone who has a very identifiable regional accent, and there's a lot of people who speak like that. So I don't know that it's entirely true to say that no one speaks with received pronunciation, because it depends what you mean. Do you mean this like sort of super aristocratic way of speaking? Then yeah, I agree. But if you mean someone who speaks without any particular regional accent, quote unquote standard English, I don't like that terminology but that's what you would call it, I suppose, the standard variety of English. Then that's how I speak. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, you see, so I like the way you explained it because you were not really too rigid about that. Because I feel like, and you did mention that received pronunciation is more or less artificial, right? And it's like one of the newest types of accents, right? Because I mean, like accents like Cockney, for example, it's much more ancient, right? Or Irish, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, if you look at the way that, for example, if you look at like Southern American, I don't mean South America, I mean the southern states of the United States of America, how they speak, a lot of their speech was influenced by 16th century Cavaliers coming over. So, for example, people who would pronounce not guitar, but stress on the first syllable, guitar, which is how they say it in a lot of southern US states. So, guitar, police, instead of police. So police with two syllables. I'm going to call the police. You wouldn't think of that as being influenced by British English, but it was 16th century Cavaliers who spoke like that, who came over from England and predominantly went to the southern states. Which is why they are of a revolutionary kind of bent, because the Cavaliers were also revolutionary people.
You're really good at doing the accents. Like, have you ever gotten any acting courses or anything like that?
No, I did in my childhood. I auditioned for a movie.
Are you serious? Which one?
So it wasn't a very successful one. So there's a series of books, children's books in the UK, which were quite popular when I was growing up. It's about this teenage spy called Alex Rider, and he is a teenager, goes to school, but he's also a spy, works for MI6, and it's pretty cool. And they made a movie out of it, and I loved these books so much. I auditioned to be in the movie. The movie's called, if you want to look it up, it's called Stormbreaker, all one word, Stormbreaker. And yeah, I almost got the part. I almost got it. I got down to the last 10 people.
Okay.
But unfortunately, they gave it to someone else who was much better at acting and much better looking than me, which is fair enough.
Now I'm very curious. I'm gonna look it up. Stormbreaker.
Yeah, do. But no, I'm not any type of actor. Just I do like doing different accents. But okay, so what from either regional accents or different country accents, which are some of the accents that fascinate you most from the English speaking world? I mean, for me, it would be maybe like South African. I find very, very.
I love it. Yes, I think I mentioned it before. I don't know what it is about it. It's kind of like, it's sort of like neutral British, but with their own, I don't know, some sort of tweaks. Like they have some, like what do they have? Like I think they pronounce the E sound very particularly, and
Yeah, well, accents always carried on the vowel sounds, as of course you know, with very few exceptions. So O's they would pronounce it in a very strange way, like or strange for us. So saying here's a colonial part of it, they would say colonial, not colonial, but colonial. So and that's influenced by obviously Afrikaans, by Dutch. So it's kind of like an amalgamation of Dutch and English and Afrikaans and everything together. But even when it comes to vocabulary, it's not only accents we forget, of course, it's also different vocabulary. So for example, do you know what robot means in South Africa?
No.
Yeah, I found this out the other day. In South Africa, they call traffic lights robots. So they say you go straight down the street, you take the third right, and then you go to the robot. That's how they say robot. Yeah.
So it's slang too. They had this word, oh my gosh, because I had lots of South African friends. Honestly, it's one of my dreams to go to South Africa because I think they're really cool people. And I feel like, Russians and South Africans have a lot in common. I don't know, maybe because of our history or something, like, because I felt like we really clicked, like certain mentality features. But there was like this word that they kept saying, like an adjective, I forgot. It was kind of something like Like in America, they would say wicked, but in South Africa, they would say something else, and I totally forgot. You don't remember? Like there's this just word like they constantly say like
I'm magic. Was it magic?
no.
No, I don't know. I've never been to South Africa, and I don't know,
Mhm.
anything more about South Africa than the next guy.
Well, they
But
say
yeah,
hectic all the time.
huh?
Hectic, but that's a different word, yeah. Hectic. Hectic.
Hectic. Oh yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's
Oh,
not
am I
quite the same
frozen?
meaning, is it? Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Australian as well. I love Australian. But again, when we talk about accents within these countries, it's fair to say that even in South Africa, there are different accents, right? There are ones, for example, that were more influenced by Afrikaans, yeah, than others. So, for example, I have a pair of friends who are married, and the girl there, she has a sort of like pure neutral accent that I would probably rather associate with British rather than South Africa, whereas her husband speaks with a more or less neutral accent, but at the same time he has a lot of South Africanism there, So
Hmm.
and they come from the same country, they come from the same city. So I guess it comes from different backgrounds, their families, their education, and so on.
Yeah.
Same with Australia. Like, so I keep saying that like Australia has is such a huge country. There's so many places there where people come with absolutely different accents, and even vocabulary is different there as well. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And that's what's always really surprised me about. So if you look at Russia, I mean, I say one of the largest country in the world, and one of the most diverse mixtures of different nationalities and different peoples on the planet, but amazingly little regional variation. So I mean, obviously I'm not a native Russian speaker, so I can differentiate. I can tell when someone has like a Ukrainian accent, or like the sort of Kuban, r kind of sound. Obviously that's an easy one to pick up. I can pick up like a Moscow accent. Well, again, I say Moscow accent. It's not really an accent. It's a slight, like, this akanya Moskva, that kind of thing, and the opposite are more like Okanya from Petersburg. You're from Petersburg, right?
yeah.
So I mean, maybe you disagree. I can pick up a certain Petersburg accent. Do you think that any such thing exists as a Petersburg accent?
I feel a little bit ashamed, but I think I wouldn't be able to. I don't think, like, yes, Ukrainian and, like some sort of strong accents. Yeah, I would probably identify, but St. Petersburg and Moscow, I don't think I would hear any difference between
So,
them.
and I'm not making a claim here. I'm asking, whether you agree, and maybe I'm wrong. This is just my sort of observation. But for example, what's a good example? Okay, so, the way that Putin speaks, I think he sounds like so if you have a vowel, like for example, yeah, that's not stressed, it
Mhm.
will be pronounced more like an e, президент, президент, that kind of thing. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I would say that the same way, I think.
So for me, that sounds more Petersburgish, if that's a word, than other regions. And there's also this kind of like Okanya, which comes along with
How would you say, can you say the word river in Russian?
Rika.
Yeah, you said yeah. Yeah, I would say Rika.
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 Yeah, yeah. Okay. There's an example. So,
Oh
and
my
it's kind of,
gosh, that's a relation.
if you listen to how, so Putin's a good example. Um, if you listen to how he speaks, it's almost, if you like crumple your mouth up a little bit, and so it's quite closed sounding like this, like that kind of a very sort of closed, narrow pronunciation. The sounds almost come more from the front of the mouth than the back, whereas the Moscow accent might be more towards the back of the throat,
Yeah.
sort of like open malaka, that kind of sound.
That's also very personal because I think like Putin just his mouth is motionless. Like honest, it's like I think if you take out the sound, you won't even notice that he's speaking
his
because
lips are quite permanently pursed up, like that kind of, yeah, that's true. But where things get really exciting is whenever I find a word which is different in different dialects of Russian. So for example, there's like, the famous Petersburg examples, like, like
yeah.
bulka,
Me. Which
those examples. But then, so the one which we very often talk about, so we talked about on the podcast before, I believe, is like a plastic document wallet, I expect, being from Petersburg, would call filik, yeah?
yeah, I think so. Is there any other way?
Yes, yeah. If you go to Tomsk and you go to a stationery store, you would ask not for filik, you would ask for multifora.
What?
Yeah?
Say it again?
Multifora.
I've
So they would
never
ask for
heard
it.
this.
And there's the little things like that. So another one, it was Vova Pavlovich we were discussing this with, actually. I was discussing this with, sorry, going in Russian mode now. He would call Tipex, what I would call Tipex in English, or corrective fluid in American English, he would call corrector in Russian. Whereas in Tyumen, where we used to live, they would call it strich or zamaska.
Zamaska, yeah, I was Zamaska. I was like, what?
Yeah. So there's 3 words there. There's another one which is interesting. What was it now? So para in university, in some places they call it lienta.
Oh my god! You know so much about Russian. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's well, I did some research on it because I was doing a lesson about regional accents, and it's just because in Russian it's very rare, very, very rare that you get these differences because Russian's so standardized, and part of that is because of, like, you know, the way that Russian's taught in schools and the sort of Soviets' effort at standardizing likhdiez, all of that stuff. That's all to thank for this sort of standardized language, at least partially. So it's really interesting to see when you get these examples of when different words are pronounced differently in different.
Yeah, I also have an idea. I mean, it's partially connected to the Soviet Union as well, but because I actually remember I used to wonder why is it that, like you said, our country is so huge and there's little to nothing of different, like, even not just vocabulary but pronunciation wise. Yeah, there's just, yeah. I can barely identify a person from any part. Yeah, maybe I can say, okay, he's not from St. Petersburg, but not like I cannot spot which part of Russia they come from. So maybe it could be connected to the fact that while we were the Soviet Union, we were also like sealed off from all the rest of the world. So we were not allowed to travel. You know, there was almost nothing international. There was no export, no import. So maybe because, you know, in other countries, like, for example, with English, you know, English was influenced by so many other languages, yeah, like Latin, Greek, French, and so on. Whereas our language was kind of confined, you know, to one country. And if there were any influence in between, it was more like just Russians, you know, influencing Russians. And for example, people from St. Petersburg and Moscow, they would be, because this just maybe, I wouldn't want to say it's more powerful, but, like, you know, because politicians are there and the power is there. So the influence from those big cities, it's kind of overwhelming, you know, it's much bigger than other small towns. Whereas in other countries, it was more open. Though now that I'm thinking about it, come to think of it, in China, it was the same thing. China was also a closed country for a very long time because of the same reasons, communism, but they also have like multiple accents, multiple dialects and accents. It's crazy. They even have different languages inside one country, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And what else is interesting is it's not that there's a third factor here, because it's not only pronunciation, it's not only vocabulary, it's also ways of expressing ideas. For example, now I don't know if this is a Tyumenism or if it's just something I picked up on while I was by coincidence in Tyumen, but for example, would you use the word, or let's say the interjection "nu" as a synonym for yes? For example, if my friend asks me, one of my Tyumen friends said, for example, you going to the bar tonight? Are you going out with us tonight? And then you could answer that "nu" in the meaning of yes, obviously.
no, I would not even understand that. I would be like,
See, that's it. Because in Tumen, you hear that all the time. No, in the meaning of yeah, well, obviously, why not? That kind of meaning.
that sounds so weird because if you said that to me, um I would probably feel like you're implying that I have to hurry up. Like no, like
Mm-hmm.
on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
something or answer or whatever, you know. So I would probably even feel a little bit insulted. I'd be like,
How dare
why?
you? And in true Petersburg fashion, you're going to call me out to a duel, pistols at dawn. Very good.
Like that,
Very
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Wow. How come you know so much about Russian?
What a weird question. What do you
Well, it's about Russian
mean?
because I always feel well, but this is a very good example that, you know, it doesn't matter which country you come from because I'm a native Russian speaker, but I have zero knowledge about this language. I can speak it, you know, but I don't know any of these particularities. So, how did you find out about them? Because you were learning them and you know through
um,
teaching or
I mean, it's hard to say that this is like one of those moments when you say some sort of interesting fact and someone asks you like, where did you know, how did you know that? Where did you like, it's like, I don't know. If I had to remember not only all the things that I know, but also where I learned it, then I wouldn't have any room left in my mind.
okay,
However,
how did you learn Russian? Maybe you can tell me this.
yeah. So, obviously at university,
Hmm.
I studied Russian at university as a foreign language. So that's 3 years in Manchester, and then 2 years in Manchester, and then 1 year abroad. So this is like what we would call practice in Russian. So that's year abroad, where you spend a year as a guest at a foreign university, and then the final year, the fourth year, was in Manchester again. And then as soon as I graduated from university, I moved to Tumen and lived there for 6 years. And yeah, so it's a combination of, so you know how you and your subscribers and your colleagues are obsessed with finding out, you know, interesting details about English and all the peculiarities, as I am as well, because not only am I a student of Russian, I'm also a teacher of English. So, you know, I like to find out those things about language as well. For me, that's true about Russian. I spend a lot of my time learning new vocabulary and finding out all these different peculiarities, and it's just observation as well. I just, you know, I'm you know, spending mental resources, and I'm spending time listening to how people speak, and surrounding myself with you know, Russian speakers, and a lot of the time it's just stuff that people tell me, you know, because surprise surprise, in my campfire speaking club, a lot of the time we speak about language, because it's one of my favorite topics. I just love language.
Um, okay, but you see, you've already told me that back in Tumen, you had colleagues who barely spoke any Russian. So what do you think sets you apart? Like, is it passion for languages or is it, I don't know, observation skills? Like, so what was it?
Well, I think it's much simpler than that. I think it's the fact that I came to Russia specifically because my education was as a what in the Russian system would be called a philologist, so, or a linguist, perhaps. Of it's kind of somewhere in between. Yeah, a philologist of Russian and Spanish languages. So I thought I could move to Spain or Latin America or Cuba or God knows where, but no, Siberia. That's where I want to go. So there was that you know, I was sort of, quote unquote, a trained linguist. I already spoke Russian by the time I moved to Russia to work, whereas my colleagues, as it very often happens in the ESL world, moved to Russia without knowing a word of Russian. And Russian is not one of those languages that you can just decide to learn casually. No,
Oh, no.
no. You gotta learn it or not. And if you learn it, you got to learn it really hard, really intense for years before you can even string together a simple sentence. And that's no exaggeration. That's no exaggeration. Before you could, you know, so I was talking about this with Anton on Campcast 2 about, so language is like, it's not a fixed point. A lot of people like to say, Russian is much harder than English. That's too simple of an analysis, in my opinion. It's not some fixed point on a graph. It's not a percentage. It's a contour. So if you imagine a graph right here, we on the y-axis we've got difficulty, and on the x-axis we've got time. Yeah, English starts off kind of in the middle, and then it's okay, fluctuates, and then gets a bit more difficult. Okay, we're doing some present perfect now, present perfect continuous. Okay, that's a bit easier. Oh, this is a bit difficult now. Got some inverted questions and cleft sentences and all that shit. And then it just goes into like like an equilibrium and tails off onto a plateau. Russian, day one, lesson one, straight up there. It is unbelievably difficult the first years that you start learning it, and it stays at a very high level of resistance. For example, this is an example I gave to Anton. In English, you can learn the word with. That's it. End of lesson. In Russian, good luck. You need to learn a lot of endings for this to be able to even dream of using that. And then you need to learn the fact that this word "f" isn't only with, it's also from, as in "chivor,"
True. Honestly, every time I talk about Russian, or for example, I'll try to teach somebody Russian, I think I've mentioned several times I have not anymore, but I hope I will get back on track with that, barter classes with a German guy who is sort of studying Russian, and he asked me questions, and every time I feel like, and this is also not an exaggeration, this is honestly me saying that I don't think I would ever be able to learn Russian if it wasn't my native language. Like, honestly,
Well,
I think I have the patience.
here's the thing. Patience is exactly the right word, because what I was saying was that although it starts off really difficult, then once you get through that initial stage and you get a bit of grammar under your belt, then you start flying, and it just drops right down in terms of difficulty, and you really start picking up speed, picking up momentum, and you make so much progress. And then it goes up to the same level of difficulty as, in my opinion, all languages do. It eventually goes to that plateau where it's just, because if Russian were genuinely difficult, or more difficult than any other language, then Russian babies would grow up not being able to speak. As it happens, that's not the case. All languages, at some level of analysis, are the same. If an alien, Steven Pinker famously said, if aliens came and landed on our planet, they would think that we spoke one language, because our languages are so similar. They are so much more similar than they are different, that at some level of analysis, it looks like it's the same thing.
True, true. Especially within one group of languages, that would be just, but yeah. I wanted to say that just recently, because I have a friend who teaches Russian, and she told me one thing that just shocked me, honestly. She said that, when you call somebody to go with you and you say "пошли," like, this is actually a mistake because it's the past simple of this word. Whereas it should be "пойдем," which is future. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, but everybody says "пошли," but L stands for past simple. And I was like, why? So it means that we use past simple when we talk about future. And that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, with all respect to people who teach it that way, I think that is the incorrect use of the word mistake. By definition, this, and again, okay, we've got this like "пойдем," but then what structure is "пойдемте"? Like, what does that mean? You're putting this "мы" ending on the verb, and then you're also adding an imperative plural suffix. But I think there's nothing wrong with using past in Russian as a type of imperative. It's a perfectly valid structure, and it's how people speak. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit more suitable for spoken Russian. Sure, maybe. But to say that it's a mistake, I think that's not really what the word mistake should mean. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I totally agree with you. I think I used the wrong word, because a mistake is something that native speakers wouldn't say, most likely. Yeah, but if it's an accepted version, it's kind of like, some time ago, often would be considered as a mistake. Yeah, now it's even a more common version than often. So yeah, totally. I don't know if you know my attitude towards mistakes, but I am strongly against correcting mistakes of other people, especially if it's out of the class, when people do that somewhere in social networks, when they see comments of people or whatever, and they start correcting
Oh
people.
yeah, yeah. That's disgusting, isn't it? We're like, yeah, Stolboy is actually written Slitna, so do you mind maybe correcting that? Like, oh, fuck off.
Right?
Like, who are you, the grammar police? Yeah.
Are. And I honestly think that when people do that, and it doesn't really matter which language it is and to who it is addressed, yeah, because it could be a friend, it could be a stranger. Most likely it's going to be a stranger because for a friend you would write a private message, yeah. It only shows your level of insecurity because if you were not obsessed with mistakes, yeah, you wouldn't even notice or you would not pay that much attention to that. Okay, a person, maybe it's a typo. Maybe this person doesn't know, maybe whatever. Why should it bother you? Yeah. But if
Hmm.
you spend your own time, educating strangers on social networks, well, most likely you are insecure about your own mistakes. And
Well, again, what do you mean by educate? Because it's not immediately obvious to me that someone who, writes Strawberry as two separate words as opposed to writing them combined as it should be, or by the rules it should be, is necessarily more or less intelligent. I mean, yeah, it's well, having said that, this is kind of a controversial point because at the same time, there are forms of language. Okay, so let's take a really clear-cut example. People who say "позвонишь" or "позвонишь." So here's the thing: if you, let's say hypothetically,
Mhm.
let's imagine that we've got the perfect way of measuring people's intelligence. Yeah, IQ, for example, isn't perfect. It's a good measure of intelligence in some ways, but it's not perfect. Okay, let's just say hypothetically we've got a perfect way of measuring people's intelligence. Okay, now we survey people and we find out what they think the pronunciation is. Позвонишь or позвонишь. Okay, all of the people who say позвонишь, we put in one football stadium, and all the people who say позвонишь, we put in another football stadium. Then we test all of those people's intelligence. How much money would you bet that the Poзвonish Stadium has a higher average level of intelligence than the Poзвonish Stadium? Because I'm not sure that it would be identical. I'm not convinced of that. What do you think?
So what are you convinced about? Can you elaborate on that?
So it is, in my opinion, I agree with you. It's not necessarily correct to say that someone who makes a quote unquote mistake, for example, writing "что boy" or saying coffee is like "anor," for example, that they're stupid people. No, that's not true at all. However, is there some grain of truth to that? Do you think? If you took if you tested the intelligence of all those people in the Poзвonish Stadium and all of the people in the Poзвonish Stadium, I think you would probably get the result that the people who more often say "позвонишь" are perhaps not at the same level of intelligence as the "позвонишь." And I'm not at all saying that there's anything inherently wrong with "позвонишь." I think it's just the people that you associate with and the people who are your peers and your colleagues, that's how you pick up language, right? And that's where accents come from because you associate with certain groups of people.
Yeah.
So do you think that if you did that experiment and you assumed that you could reliably measure people's intelligence, do you think you would get a different reading from each stadium?
Absolutely. And I also believe that, so I believe that there are certain qualities or certain, let's say intelligence, let's call it intelligence, that we are born with. Yeah. So it's something innate. And there's something that we develop. It could be, so like basically you're born with, I don't think we're born as a clean slate. Yeah. So there's something already inherent in us. Yeah. And so we have some potential basically, but we can either waste this potential or we can evolve it into something else. Yeah. So that's why absolutely, if so, that's why I just don't want to say that intelligence and the level of education, like they don't really equal, you
I
know.
agree. I agree.
Sorry, but once again, if we talk about whether or not I would bet money on those people who say позвонишь more often, yeah, for sure, absolutely. Just because, and again, that could be connected to the fact that they were surrounded by more educated people. They got more exposure, to literature and stuff like that. Like, for example, I have a very vivid example in my family. I have two grannies. One who was born in St. Petersburg, and she got a higher education, and she was a geologist her whole life. So she's a pretty pretty educated person, yeah. And I have another granny who was born in Crimea in a small village, and she never got her higher education. She never got a degree, and she would say "позвонишь," and like I constantly correct her, which is none of my business, but I constantly correct her.
And
Um,
and
I
just to
really,
clarify, I'm not saying, you're not saying, and I'm not saying that there's anything like definitionally wrong with позвонишь. It's just as logical as saying позвонишь, but there is something there. There is something about it that just by pure coincidence, people from a certain background say it a different way. And this is not, and I'm not trying to be prescriptivist here. Prescriptivism is dead. However, when we teach, I think sometimes we have to play the prescriptivist game. And we have to kind of pretend like позвонишь is a mistake and позвонишь is correct, even though if you really look at it, there's no difference. It's just a different way of saying it. It's just, if you like it, it's just a different accent. Why not? Just like in Southern America, they say guitar instead of guitar. But it's there are some examples as well. I'm afraid I can't think of an English one right off the top of my head because I more think about this with learning Russian. For example, there are certain words which, even though I know the correct pronunciation, quote unquote, by the dictionary, correct pronunciation, I think that if you say it like that, it kind of sounds a bit pretentious. It's like too correct. Включишь is an example. Who the hell says that? That's the correct answer in the dictionary if you look it up. Not включишь, включишь. I'm sorry, but that again, that just like some people misuse the word mistake. I think that's a misuse of the word correct. That's not what correct means. What do you mean by correct if it doesn't mean how most people say it? Again, Shavil versus Shavil. I mean, well, tvorog tvorog is kind of different because you could say it both ways and people don't really care. But with, if I say Shavil, which is in the dictionary is the correct answer, I think that sounds a little bit pretentious. It's clearer to you, I think, because you're obviously a native Russian speaker, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but I would feel a little bit uncomfortable saying, включишь чайник мне, пожалуйста. Like, it's a little bit too much, too clean, too squeaky, too correct.
That's weird. Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, maybe not pretentious, but because I wouldn't think that you would use that word on purpose, just to show off the level of your education. But I'm thinking maybe I would even correct you. Like, I don't know. Because
yeah, exactly. So that begs the question, why is it in the dictionary? If you say that the correct answer is actually включишь, well, what do you mean by correct? What does that mean if most people don't say it?
Yeah, true. But well, it definitely shows maybe it's a very good identification process of your background, so that is true. So like with my grannies, yeah. So I'm not saying that one of them is more stupid, than the other one just because they use such words, but it's just that the background, we can identify the background by that. But yeah, honestly, I also know lots of people who are highly educated, but we pronounce, for example, certain words differently. I have the friend that I just talked about who speaks Russian, who teaches Russian. Obviously, she speaks Russian. So I've noticed that we pronounce the word hostel differently. I say hostel, and she says hostel, and I have no idea why. And we both are Russian, and we both speak with I would want to believe that, proper Russian, but we pronounce it differently. And which one is a mistake? I don't know. I have no clue. But doesn't matter really, because I understand her, she understands me, and that doesn't interfere with our communication, right? And nobody corrected anybody. So I've never corrected her. She's never corrected me. So
Hmm.
I think people just need to, especially in Russia, because I feel like maybe it comes from the Soviet Union or somewhere. People just need to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more, I don't know, open-minded about things
Or
like this.
less prescriptivist, sure. Um,
Yes.
yeah, this is one of my biggest criticisms of the way that languages are taught in the Russian education system. So the Russians, in terms of Russian education, the Russians are very good at teaching physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, not so much. Strangely, I don't know why that is, but it's not one of the strongest sciences. But a lot of the, if you look at like this sort of, this international, like, Olympiads, as they call them, the top teams who win like the physics, while the mathematics, almost a lot of them are Russians. So the Russians are very good at teaching that kind of stuff. When it comes to languages, I'm not so convinced. I think the idea of treating language as if it's an exact science
Yes.
is a misguided approach, in my opinion. Saying there's one answer, it's in the back of the book, learn it. Apart
Yeah.
from tvorog, which we can now say for some reason, it's yeah, and this like sort of aggressively prescriptivist approach to learning language. I mean, I'm sorry, language doesn't work like that. Also, biology doesn't work. That's probably the same reason why biology isn't as strong as something like physics or chemistry or mathematics in the Russian education system. Biological categories aren't as neat and nicely contained as we would like them to be. And the same thing is definitely true about language. But I think going back to something you said earlier, or that you hinted at earlier, if you remember always that language is not only a way of communicating, it's also it's like the clothes that you wear. If you want, you can choose to wear, abibas, something that you bought from the central market, whatever, tracksuits every day, or you can choose to, wear nice, respectable clothes so that people and take care of your hair and groom yourself and make sure that you're a respectable looking person. In the same way, language is also an indicator of your social status, if you want it to be. So that means that I think we as teachers have a duty to teach people, look, for all I care, you can, okay, here's an example in English that is equivalent to pozwonisz, is espresso, espresso. So you can go ahead, and teach someone, look, some people say espresso, some people say espresso. But as a teacher, I think you have a duty to then add, by the way, espresso is how it's originally pronounced in Italian. The preferred option is espresso, but some people say espresso. And to not say you must say this, it's in the back of the book, but just to let them know, look, if you want to come across as someone who speaks with a quote unquote high educated level of language, this is how you say it. Doesn't mean you have to say that. You can say espresso if you want, just like you can go and wear, trikoshki from the market every day if you really want. It's up to you.
I just recalled another word while I was listening to you, etc., etc.
Yeah, classic.
Hello, everyone. I cannot agree more with you, and I would like to add to that this is possibly one of the reasons why I am so obsessed with pronunciation over grammar, for example, because I feel like, yeah, of course you can make mistakes with whatever grammar, vocabulary, semantics, and so on. But I think when people speak clearly and naturally, not necessarily, again, imitating a certain accent, but just like when it's pleasant to listen to you and when there's no misunderstanding because you keep mispronouncing words, not like espresso and espresso, because if I say espresso, you certainly understand what I'm talking about, right? But I
Mhm.
mean, like because your pronunciation obviously influences listening skills as well, right? So chances are you won't understand your partner, and also the person who's listening to you might have troubles understanding you because of your pronunciation. Whereas, for example, when people speak with certain grammar mistakes, well, I mean, it's not, I don't want to say it's not that important, but um, I've noticed that when I listen to a person, for example, I have a friend who's from China, and he speaks with a very good pronunciation. So his speech is very clear, but he does make occasional mistakes with grammar because Chinese interference, comes in play. So he speaks like when you listen to him, he speaks. He produces a certain like nice impression, And for example, he was hired several times at schools. He teaches English, even though he makes mistakes, just
Mhm.
because of this impression, yeah, that he produces onto people. Because I think it's thanks to his pronunciation. Whereas people who speak rigidly, like people who try to sound extremely accurately, but then they don't pay attention to their pronunciation, well, chances are when other people listen to you, they no matter how accurate you are, you will not be able to produce impression of a pleasant speaker or a person who is
Mm.
nice to have a conversation with because the way how comfortable you feel and the way how clear you sound and the way how fluent you speak, for example, yeah, that matters more than the number of mistakes that you make.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point, and that's certainly borne out by my experience when when I'm assessing Cambridge exams. Um, the first, so as you know, in Cambridge exams, depending on which exam it is, one of the criteria that I'm listening for when I'm the assessor is pronunciation. So there's other things like interactive communication, discourse management, lexical resource, grammatical resource, etc., or etc., as some people might say. But pronunciation is always the first thing I mark, because if you notice, if you've done a Cambridge exam recently, and if you look at the assessor when you're doing part one, the amount of paperwork that you have to fill in while the exam is already going on is unbelievable. You need to put your examiner number and your colleague's examiner number, the center number, the date of the exam, which speaking cards the examiner is going to use, all of this nonsense. You have to do it for every single candidate. So if you've got like a group of three, it's a nightmare. I'm trying to get all of this paperwork filled in, acting like I'm listening, but I'm trying my best to listen. But even while I'm filling in all of that paperwork during part one of the speaking exam, I always mark pronunciation. It's the first impression that I get of someone's level of language is their pronunciation. That's absolutely right. Very good point.
Yeah, I heard too, I heard several people who, for example, whose English is top notch in terms of the vocabulary choice, the grammar structures that they use. But if they speak with a very thick Russian accent, somehow, like, I don't even know how to explain that. Yeah, it's kind of like magic. But somehow people who perceive your speech, they like your language no matter how elaborate and sophisticated it is, it downgrades somehow. And vice
Mm,
versa. I've heard people, for example, with intermediate level, which is not that high, and probably they wouldn't feel so confident using different structures and collocations, but because they speak clearly, somehow, again, magically, their level increases in I want to say in the eyes, in the ears of other people.
in our mind's ears. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So pronunciation, to recap, is simultaneously not important, but also the most important thing. So I hope that's that's clarified things for our viewers
Can
slash
I ask you a
listeners.
question since you're an expert when it comes to exams because we've touched upon mistakes and stuff like that. So maybe you could explain to me as a person again who lived in Russia and I think, well, at least you strike me this way, you are quite familiar with our mentality, right? So why do you think people are so obsessed with exams in Russia? Like, what is it? Because you said, again, espresso and espresso, yeah, but with exams, it's not going to work. If you say espresso in, while having an exam, well, most likely you're gonna get a mark there, right? So, what is it about us? Like, because it frustrates me so much. I come across so many people who think that they are not good enough, and instead of actually investing all they have, all the energy and time into making their language as natural as possible, they choose a different path and they decide, even though they might not need these exams in the future, yeah, so they might not, because they're not moving, they're not trying to get a job, they're not trying to, so it's not a requirement, yeah, for their future, but they choose to prepare for exams um, as as if it's gonna somehow uh, just by passing that exam with flying colors, they will improve their language automatically, which I don't think is equal. You know, I think
Hmm.
it's two different paths. Exam has to be taken when your language is already at that level. Yeah, so if you're taking CAE, your English has to be advanced. That's why you're taking this exam to prove it, not vice versa. Not like you being upper intermediate, you need to get to advanced in order to take and pass this exam.
Yeah.
You know?
So, there's the flip side to that is that if you want to make your English advanced, then registering for an exam like CAE, or at least striving towards it, excuse me, striving towards it is a good way of giving you like a motivation, a goal, something to work towards, and that's fair enough. But I'm not going to dodge your question. Your question is why are the Russians so obsessed with exams? So this is just my 2 cents, but I think my take on it is that I think Russians, generally speaking, put a lot of faith in authority, whether that's centralized authority, the government, universities. Um, so but the same. What that means is then, if it's in the back of the book, it is correct. That's what the word correct means. Whereas, as me and you discussed, if you define Kluchish as correct, I think you've lost your mind. So there's that. There's the idea that there's this one centralized program and one centralized source of information, source of knowledge. And I hate to sort of beat this drum, this my sort of anti-communist drum, but I think a lot of it has to do with totalitarianism. That's what a totalitarian state does. You don't need to make your own books, your own magazines, your own newspapers, your own art, your own. You don't need to make your own TV shows. You don't need to make your own movies. We'll take care of that. We'll do that for you. Don't worry about it. That's like anytime if I watch a film, and a thing comes up on the screen says financed by the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation, I turn it off. Anything the government tries to invest in is terrible by definition. Anyway, we're getting off the topic of what you asked about exams. Now, I think that in relation to that fact, the fact that Russians, not only Russians, but a lot of different countries, they have this quote unquote mentality where they put a lot of faith in people in power, in institutions like universities, like exams, like the government, like the media, the state media. With that then comes this really important idea that for me, the most important thing is that I've got this bumashka, and I can use that to prove that I can go up in the level. So to answer your question, it's about authoritarianism and it's about bureaucracy. A bureaucratic place is a place where having the bumashka is more important than having the knowledge. That's why when you go and study, let's say, engineering at a Russian university, so if you go to a British university, you study engineering, and that's that. In a Russian university, the first year is going to be PE, just 9 year, all of this sort of nonsense, utter nonsense. And it was the same, they didn't learn, it was the same problem in the Soviet times when they had to, you've got people who want to become physicists, yeah? And in the first year, they've got this, sort of nonsense subjects like, history of the Communist Party, which no one took seriously, no one cared about. And you would either just, get the teacher a bottle of cognac or you would just, get around it. Some these days, people pay for those subjects. And I think that's a reason, not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons why there is such a high level, an epidemic, so to speak, of cheating at every stage of the Russian education system. It's because of stuff like that. Not entirely, but a lot of it is to do with these subjects that no one needs, they didn't ask for, they didn't want. Again, it's top-down authoritarian rule from the university saying, you are going to study this because we told you to, not because I want to study it. That's not how education should work. I choose what I want to study. Yes, I do need to listen to experts and I need to listen to my professors because they are knowledgeable about these subjects. But don't tell me that I need to study philosophy if I want to study engineering. No thanks. That's not how education should be structured. So I think it's to do with that. It's authoritarianism and it's bureaucracy.
You know what? Well, I totally agree with you. And I have this hope, this fond hope that it will change because it's 2021, and people have exposure to different sources, right? So we have the internet now, and you can see how other people live, and what their education is like. But I do want to say that everything you just said, it resonated with me a lot because I immediately recalled being, I think it was my 10th grade or so, when I was one of the only ones among my peers who was very determined that I was going to get my education connected to languages, so I was, because when you're like 15 and 16, it's way too early for you to decide on your path, future path. But at that moment I was absolutely sure that this is what I needed, and we're not going to talk about Yige and stuff like that. This is a totally different topic. But I realized, okay, so I knew that what I wanted, and I knew that to get that, I needed to take Russian, English, literature, which I found out like a few months before that, and that's it. But for some reason, for 2 years, I was forced to take an extra class of chemistry, which I absolutely despised. I was, I was
Jesus.
I hated that class. I hated the teacher. I was never good at chemistry, obviously, because it's not what, it's not my mindset. And I was one of the lucky ones who was able to define that for myself, at the age of 15. But I was still forced to do that, wasting my time instead of doing something that I was actually good at, and that mattered in my life at that moment. I had to do stuff like, and I still, obviously I don't remember anything from those classes because I didn't pay attention. So and also to add on this topic, I remember a little bit earlier you mentioned that Russians are usually good at maths, physics, and stuff like that. Well, the same exact thing I can say about China again, or other Asian countries. And I think the problem is very similar between our countries, is very similar because they also have this, well, obviously China is also communist. So that's one thing. And I've noticed that, it's kind of a very common, let's say, prejudice, that Asian people are very good at maths, physics, and stuff like that. So all this analytical stuff. But they suck at languages most of the time. Obviously it also could be connected to the fact that Chinese is completely different, and it's a completely different system.
Sure.
But I think it's also because their country imposes lots of things on them, and because everything is so robotic, like they have to, because of all the population there, they have to fight for each place, and there's lots of competition, and there's no other way how they can control it apart from rigid exam system and so on. So that just proves that I guess it's because of that. But what can we do about it? We have to do something about it. I want to save our education system.
Who was the guy who said, was it Celtic or Shindrin who said that about wake me up in 100 years and Russians will be what was it?
Drinking vodka?
Yeah, drinking and stealing. I agree. A lot of people say that, now the new generation is coming, everything's going to change. I don't know. I wish it were different. But a lot of the problems that are so deeply rooted in the education system and society in general, the corruption, the cheating, the over reliance on government authority, all of this, and we've got whether it's the Communist Party, whether it's the oligarchs. You don't hear about oligarchs anymore. Do you know why? Because they've been replaced. The new oligarchs are CDVQ. That's the new oligarchs. There'll always be someone ready to step into that power vacuum. Putin got rid of all the oligarchs and got all his mates in there, without wanting to get too political. And I'm not one of these people who's one thing you can never do. You can say that I'm wrong. Fine. I probably am, and definitely am about almost everything I say. But you can never call me a Russophobe. You can never call me a Russophobe, which is one of these arguments that people say, oh, anything that you say that's bad about Russia, you must be a Russophobe. No, I spend almost all of my free time speaking with Russians. I have a Russian wife. I spent 6.5 years living in Russia. And I always said, you criticize what you love most. And I definitely love Russia. Absolutely. With all my heart. But that doesn't mean that, as you say, that there are things that can be improved and should be improved. I'm, for whatever reason, not optimistic. I don't know why. I just think that these things are just, not to sound too racialist here, but I think a lot of it's in the blood of the country. It's in the DNA. Can't be gotten rid of.
I remember I actually had a conversation, I think it was with my dad, about something similar. So I think there is a saying in Russian, not sure if I can actually quote it 100% accurately, but it's something like people deserve their government, or people have earned their government. Yeah, something like that. And it's kind of like the question of chicken and eggs, like which one came first? I'm not completely sure.
The answer's egg, by the way.
Yeah.
See, there's an example of like Russians love saying it. So it's chicken and egg question. See what I mean about learning biology in school? The answer is egg. And if you think it's chicken, then you don't know about evolutionary biology. But no, I'm only being half serious, of course. I think that it's a question of a lot of people. Russians love criticizing the government. Despite what I said about over-reliance and authority, Russians always they criticize the government. They criticize
just talking.
Exactly. Do something, for God's sake. They like people say, oh my God, what's the point of voting? And what oh, look at our roads. Oh my God, Russia's the only country where they have this road sign, Plохая дорога. Oh my God, how funny. They're stealing the budget again. Oh my God, it's all corrupt. Do something. Stop speaking. And actually, it's your country, your responsibility. This is one of the reasons I left. You asked earlier. I'm sick and tired of all of the complaining, all of the speaking, and none of the acting. And there are things that I don't like about my country. And there are times when I don't act, when I should do. But I mean, the entire country is just, it's just, you get the government you deserve. I agree. You get the government you deserve.
But it could be also connected. I mean, usually it's all based on the history of the country. So not in any way am I trying to justify that, but I'm just curious if it has something to do with our history of being, oppressed all the time and being genuinely terrified of being killed or of being, your family being just snatched and, and imprisoned or whatever. So because we were never allowed to express our opinion, people were like, for example, my granny, again, she's a highly educated person and she's very wise. But whenever you ask her, well, what do you think about the Soviet Union, and Stalin and stuff like that? Well, she obviously still talks about him in a, maybe not in a positive way, but like she always tries to mention something nice and like that it was much better, that it was a much more prosperous country and so on and so forth. And I think it doesn't come from the fact that she is delusional, but it comes from the fact that she is up to this day, she is scared, even though because she was brought up like this. Maybe.
I think it's an attempt to try and misremember history at the same time, which the British do all the time. Look at the history. Look at the history of like Trafalgar, for example, and the sort of myth of the British naval might, the empire. The British love misremembering history. So I'm not trying to pick on Russia unfairly. All countries do this, but Russia, does it a lot. And the sort of very worrying trend these days of children, as well as adults who are sort of yearning to go back to the Soviet times, and this meme of Stalin being Stalin was a strong guy, and was quite brutal. But at the same time, brutal in the sense of the English word, not the Russian word, although he was brutal in the sense of the Italian as well. And people always say the same thing. And if you actually listen to what they say, this is a meaningless statement. This is how it sounds. At the end of the Second World War, Russia needed a strong leader. Therefore, Stalin was appropriate. Now, explain and ask these people, who say this. Explain exactly what you mean by that. I don't mean kind of, I don't mean sort of. Explain exactly what you mean. Explain why, in your opinion, it was appropriate to have a leader in the country who killed so many people. He built some hydroelectric dams and made a nice metro system. Oh, that's okay then. Yeah, it's and as yeah.
People don't question this though. I mean, it's, whatever is written, it's ridiculous, but I sometimes even fight with my family over that. They still believe that whatever is written in the books or whatever is said on TV is the truth. Per se, just because
well,
separate
much yeah. Okay. We've been going for ages. This is, I think, the longest podcast I've ever recorded.
Oh my gosh.
No, it's great. It's great. This is a true, do you know what I mean? Do you see what I mean now about gathering around the campfire, having a true human, genuine conversation? It's great. It's great.
Of course. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, ditto. We'll do another one sometime, and I'm going to link people to your page. I'm going to link my 800 followers to your page of 20,000 and 26,000, and we'll definitely do one of these again.
To my page as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you post it on your page, and I can just repost it too.
We'll figure out the logistics. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Awesome.
Okay. I'll see you soon. Thanks for coming on, Julia. Bye.